Greetings from Hairenik. In Armenia, Security Council Chair Armen Grigoryan is making headlines for his comments on food security. In a nutshell, if Armenia loses access to wheat, he says, let Armenians eat rice. On this newscast, we'll speak to Armenia's former Minister of Agriculture and current lawmaker from the Armenia Alliance, Artur Khachatryan, for his take on this critical topic. We'll break down the latest developments in Armenia with our correspondent Nare Navasardian, and then we'll go to New York for highlights from the annual ANCA Eastern Region Gala, getting keynotes from speeches and learning about their emphasis on the future. Let's go first to parliamentarian and ARF member Artur Khachatryan. Welcome to Hairenik. Dr. Khachatrian, please start by telling us a little bit about your background in Armenia's agriculture sector, namely your tenure as minister. How important is wheat to Armenia's food security?
Right. Okay. Thanks for inviting me to the show. Yeah, I served as Minister of Agriculture, not for a very long time though. Before that, I was also the governor of Shirak province, and Shirak is also extremely agricultural-based province in northwest of Armenia. It's basically the capital of Shirak is Gyumri. So, to give you some idea what region I'm talking about. Yeah, Armenia has imported about 470,000 tons of wheat last year. The local production was about 170,000 tons. So basically this means that the imports of wheat compared to local production is more than 2.5 times. Armenia is a very, very heavy grain consumption country. You know, the national eating habit, the usual diet makes us consume wheat very heavily. Plus, of course, wheat is used also for culinary purposes and also as animal feed. So, before going into more details about your question, let me just remind why this noise started. Let me say it this way. Okay, a few weeks ago, Armenia's National Security Secretary attended a conference in Ukraine about food security, and Russia's spokeswoman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that instead of going to Ukraine, you better concentrate on being self-sufficient yourselves, because Armenia imports grain mainly from Russian Federation. More than 90% comes from Russian Federation. Before that, Azeri's occupation of Artsakh was providing about 20% of wheat grain consumed in the Republic of Armenia. So after losing Artsakh during these authorities, during Nikol Pashinyan's regime, we become even more dependent on Russian imports. So these people, this government, instead of thinking about increasing our self-sufficiency level, increasing our food security level, they speak about crazy, they speak just crazy ideas. Okay.
So rice, yes.
Okay, rice.
The crazy idea being that Armenia should perhaps substitute bread for rice. Tell me, is that a reasonable substitute?
No, absolutely. That's completely crazy, because the eating habits are being developed through millennia, and you cannot switch from grain to rice. Other than that, Armenia has produced 0 grams of rice. Okay, Armenia doesn't grow rice. Armenia imports 100% of rice. Last year, we have imported about 11,000 tons of rice, so about 60 times less than grain. Okay, so if Armenia converts from grain to rice, this will be Armenia 100% dependent on imports. This is crazy. So instead of reducing dependence, instead of increasing food security, even if by some miracle Armenians, instead of eating lavash, start eating rice, then the food security will go even further down. So Armenia has to promote growing grain as part of food security program. Now we use about less than 50% of arable land. So this government shall do everything to promote the farmers to use this land to grow wheat, barley, and other grains. This way to reduce the food, the dependency on foreign countries, foreign providers, increase the food security. What these people propose will it's not realistic to start with, and second, they think in a completely wrong direction.
Indeed, I think most people would agree that Armenia should seek to be as self-sustaining as possible. Now, since you held the position of agriculture minister, the ruling party has actually disbanded the ministry. Could you tell us what insights you have on that and how detrimental that's been for farmers?
Well, 5 years ago, agriculture was about 18% of GDP. Today, it dropped to 11% of GDP. Agriculture either doesn't grow or grows at 1 or 1.5% per year. Okay, so after dismantling the agriculture ministry, the agriculture share has gone down. This basically means Armenia's dependence on foreign providers has gone up. The area under cultivation has gone down. It's a very difficult problem. Okay, so instead of promoting cultivating land, they promote imports. So this basically means killing own industry to promote foreign industry. Okay. Well, the agriculture shall pursue three goals. First of all is, of course, increasing the profits, well-being of the people who are engaged in agriculture. Second is food security. Third is preserving the natural habitat of people, so that the farmers, the people who live in villages, keep living in villages to preserve their natural habitat. And if you look at Armenia, only in the border regions, we do not have large towns, except that in Sunni area. They are villages, and by destroying agriculture, by destroying the Ministry of Agriculture, they leave our frontiers unprotected.
And you are currently in Washington, D.C. Can you tell us what are you briefly doing there? And this comes, right now. I believe there is a conversation in Armenia about, is there a role? Can the opposition make a difference when this government, this administration, has so much power? And so maybe you can speak to that briefly.
Okay, so I'm in Washington, D.C. On a forum called International Parliamentary Forum on World Bank and IMF. These are regular meetings that happen in spring and in fall, preceding IMF annual meeting. Okay, so the topic of this forum is, of course, inequality, economic growth, environmental protection, and conflicts, the impact on conflicts on well-being of the population. So I'm here particularly to talk about the impact of conflicts, because Azerbaijan has imposed blockade against Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey for more than 30 years, which causes severe hardships to Armenian population, which restrains Armenia's growth potential. And since another topic is environmental protection, I would also talk to the parliamentarians, describe the situation, how Azerbaijan has used environment as an excuse to block the road to Lachin. You remember that people who were representing themselves as environmentalists have blocked the road to Lachin. And plus today, Azerbaijan, who is one of the largest polluters in the world, is going to host COP29 in Baku in a couple of days, which is on sustainable growth. So to bring to the attention of fellow parliamentarians how Azerbaijan abuses the word environment to greenwash and to pursue its political and military goals.
Well, thank you for representing Armenia's positions at this important forum, and please do stay in touch, and we'll be glad to have you back on the show.
Pleasure is all mine. Have a nice day.
You as well. Now let's go to our correspondent in Yerevan, Nari Nevasardian, to break down this and other top stories from the homeland. Welcome, Nari.
Hi, Alison.
Nari, what were National Security Council Chair Armen Grigoryan's exact words regarding the wheat issue?
At one of the forums in Yerevan dedicated to the ruling party's initiative Crossroads of Peace, the INSS security head Armen Grigoryan talked about how Armenia can be lenient and flexible and change its essential goods. And he brought an example saying that if someone threatens our food security by cutting our supply of wheat, then the Armenian public will switch to rice.
Interesting. We just heard, of course, from National Assembly lawmaker Artur Khachatryan, who emphasized that unlike wheat, which Armenia grows and has the capacity to grow even more of due to only 50% of its arable land being used, rice is something that Armenia does not grow at all. So that's quite an interesting statement by the national security chief. Can you tell us, in what context does this come? Armenia, it does produce wheat. Why mention rice?
Russia is our main supplier of wheat. It supplies, I think, over 90% of our wheat. So Armen Grigoryan was hinting at the prospect of making the political decision to reduce the dependency on Russia and having the Armenian people essentially cope or just otherwise make do, maybe have some replacement products, etc. This is very questionable. Perhaps the first question is, why should Armenia reduce this dependency? Because we have never had any problem with the wheat price or quality or logistics. And Russia is one of the biggest supplier of the world. They sell their wheat to Turkey, to Egypt. 90% of Georgian wheat is also Russian. So there is a big question why this issue will arise.
So we have this conversation around wheat being put into the public sphere, and there's certainly a parallel to be made between the introduction of the question of where Armenia gets its gas as well. Armenia gets its gas from Russia, as we know, and the ruling party has slowly but surely putting into circulation the idea that perhaps Armenia could consider buying gas from Azerbaijan. Why not? And that is assuming that Azerbaijan would even provide Armenia with gas. We all remember what transpired in Artsakh and how Azerbaijan weaponized gas supply as soon as they were given control over the gas pipeline in Bertsor, also known as Lachin. They took that opportunity to cut the gas supply, and I don't believe we have any indication that they would not do the same with the gas pipeline that runs through Tavush. In fact, we see the opposite indication that they would indeed take the opportunity to cut that gas pipeline. And now we're talking about wheat. The same idea is being put into circulation that perhaps, we could just simply switch our supplier or what we eat, when in fact it is much more likely that Armenians will see deprivation rather than simply a change in the menu. Let's talk a little bit about the intersection between food security and border security, and what is the conversation or pushback right now in the parliament. Maybe we can start. You can give us a little bit of context. Where's the link between Artsakh and what's happening today in Armenia regarding food security?
Well, Artsakh Republic was also a big supplier for the Republic of Armenia, and now that it's occupied, of course, that is also a loss of food security. And Artsakh was also a matter of just plain military security in the traditional sense. And the most symbolic loss of both security and food security occurred in Tavush just a few months ago, where the inhabitants of Girans they had this wheat fields, they planted this wheat, and then it was harvested and sold by Azerbaijan. So this is the first instance of demarcation leading to Armenia having reduced security and food security. And Garnik Danielyan, an MP from Hayastan Dashing, mentioned this actually, saying that not only do people call him worried about their security, but that this is also a matter of losing dignity, losing territory.
Indeed, he specifically mentioned the wheat issue, and he said, "Is this your demarcation process?" Nare, what is the latest news about the so-called demarcation process? I know a lot. This has created some very heated arguments in the parliament regarding, the impact on Armenia and how it's being conducted.
Yes, recently the National Assembly got a document on demarcation and delimitation. This is a new document. I believe it was consolidated in September. So this raises a lot of questions. Not only did the opposition Hayastan Dashing have questions about how constitutional this document is, but they also raised the issue of, okay, if we are to have this guidance on demarcation now, then what was it that you were doing in Tavush this last spring? So this is only like one part of the questions. Another issue that they raised is the threat of war and threat of violence that civil contract also admits to and speaks about, and this makes all the agreements null and void. And in essence, what we've seen is this process of partial demarcation delineation, where different logic and different maps are applied to different regions, and it is all according to who has the military power and not according to principles of justice and the orientation towards long-term stability.
Indeed. It is now public info that the agreement signed at least by this commission, at least the Armenian side of the commission, is not actually using any map as a guide. Deputy Prime Minister Armen Grigoryan got defensive today, and he said that's because different maps will be used in different areas. He's refusing to disclose which maps will be used for which areas. So it's certainly disturbing because it seems to be an ad hoc process, and every time it is favorable to Azerbaijan. I know there's a recurring conversation in Armenia and in the diaspora perhaps about the value of the opposition taking part in what many see as an occupation administration. although certainly without their critical questions, we likely wouldn't have anywhere near this much information. Nari, can you just briefly tell us a little bit about, what the opposition, how they've been using their position in the parliament to gather information, to bring things to light, and where they have drawn the line on critical matters?
Well, one example of the opposition crafting the narrative is in regards to this demarcation delimitation process. On the ground, they started the movement Davush for the Homeland, which was again the first response to this illegal process. And then they also used this movement, even though they were not directly associated with it, but they used this movement to raise awareness about the unconstitutional nature of the process that's going on. And now that we have this document, they also delineated point by point why this is unconstitutional, this is illegal, this cannot serve as grounds for long-term peace and stability. And this is, I think, very important because long-term you need to do your homework, you need to have your facts-based, even though civil contract acts without transparency and without accountability, there will come a point where they will be brought to justice. And for that moment, we need to have all the proofs and all the documentation of the unconstitutional nature of their actions. And so, yes, even though the opposition is in a National Assembly that is mostly occupied, it still refuses to directly participate in this process, and they, in their statement, Dashing mentions that they're not going to be taking part in the vote, and they're not going to be legitimizing this process that they said does not meet the criteria for alignment with Armenia's interests.
Indeed. Well, Nare, let's keep tabs on how this story develops. And thank you so much for all those insights. Let's pivot now to New York and check in with Chantelle Nasri, who chaired the ANCA Eastern Region's annual gala that took place just this past weekend. Chantelle Nasri, welcome back to Hairenik. It's a pleasure to have you here. Over the weekend, there was the ANCA Eastern Region's annual gala. Tell us, how did it go? What are some highlights that you believe our audience should know about?
Thanks for having me back, Allison. We've had quite a weekend here in New York. It was an amazing, successful event. We welcomed over 210 people in Queens, New York at Terrace on the Park. And it was a culmination of awardees. We were also able to welcome Representative Grace Meng from New York's Congressional District 6. She gave some lovely remarks with regards to the advocacy that she's doing for us as a community on the Hill. And it really was, from beginning to end, such a celebration of the hard work that we do, as well as setting some intentions for the future of the ANCA in the Eastern region.
Indeed. Can you tell me what were some of the standout sentiments, quotes, messages that attendees heard for those who were not able to attend?
Yeah, so I'll start with Representative Grace Meng's remarks. She was the first award recipient of the evening. If you don't know Grace Meng, she is one of the most humble women on the Hill. She does not take it lightly, the work that she does for our diaspora, and she reinvigorated the message and her commitment to us as an Armenian American community. So it was wonderful to hear from her. We also had the Kardashian Award winner of the Eastern region, which was Antranik Budakian, and he's such a veteran activist in our New York community. We all know him so well, and he really just reinstated how proud that he was of the community, how far we've come, not just in our learnings, but in our education of the youth, and reinvesting in the youth. He's very proud to see all the work that we're doing. We also had an awardee for the first time in the New York community, the City Community Trailblazer Award went to Tony Vartanyan, and he was really his key message, which I found so powerful, was transition, and really talking about how proactive we have to be in thinking about the next generation of leaders. What exactly are we passing on, learning from the past, but also focusing on the future. We also had posthumously awarded Dr. Artur. The Khachatrian family is no stranger to the work that we do in New York, and honoring their late father was such an important moment for us as a community, as he really was such a loud voice in creating the foundation that is the New York American community, Armenian American community.
Indeed. And I also believe it was Rafi Hamparian who gave the keynote speech. Can you tell me any standout messages that he brought?
National Chairman Rafi Hamparian of the ANCA closed out the evening on such a high note, really referencing Karakin Nejde and our roots as Armenians, and not to forget where we come from to help dictate where we're going. If you've ever heard to Rafi speaking publicly, he has a very powerful tone, and I think it really brought the evening to such a strong and inspiring moment as we all kind of came to a close in the evening.
So Chantelle, as we know, the silent auction is one of the major components of the gala, and the gala in general is a major fundraiser that allows the ANCA to continue its work on behalf of the Armenian cause. Can you tell me about some of the highlights from the auction and how much was raised in general, and what that is going to enable the ANCA Eastern Region to do for the community?
Yeah, the silent auction, among some of the items I've already listed that were up for bidding, raised close to $15,000, which contributed to the overall success of raising $220,000 at this year's gala. That is not a small figure, and it is one that we plan to reinvest back into our youth programs, back into our advocacy programs, and back into the Eastern region in general, as we continue to build on the foundation that is so strong in ANCA, and to continue to do and propel our work forward.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much for your leadership and all you did to make this year's gala a major success. And we look forward to hearing the announcement of where next year's gala will be held. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you, Allison.
Take care. Thank you all for joining us this week on Hairenik. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, and we'll see you next week.